state and create a settler colonial state. Look, the French did it in Algeria, right? Now that ended, right? But America's still here, Australia's still there. So, is it legitimate? The expansion of the United States was not legitimate. It was genocide, right? But we're here. Here we are, right? And I got nowhere to go. So so in that sense, I kind of, whether we think that we see that it was ethnic cleansing and it was, I got to say, I think if I'd been around in 1948, I probably would have been way sympathetic with the state of Israel, given what had happened in the Holocaust and all that. And especially if I had this sort of colonial mentality that said Arabs are, they're not civilized people, and we can push them around. They don't care, But here we are today, and so whether it was legitimate or not, they're there. So we have to make some kind of settlement for the human beings, right? And make sure people have rights. So.
I'm sorry, because we only have 10 more minutes, and I want to get to this.
How do you know I'm going to ask? Maybe you don't want to get to it. Hi. I just had a couple questions. Two questions. One is with the '67 war. With regard, I don't know if perhaps it was just because you were just sort of trying to paint broad strokes and get through, but the way that you presented it was that basically, England and France were pissed off and used Israel to kick Egypt's butt.
56 war. 67 war was...
I'm sorry.
That was 56 war.
Suez... Oh, sorry, the 56 war. I apologize. Not the 67 war. You're right, the 56 war. Thank you. Whereas seemingly there was, while they were trying to, closing off the control of England and France to the canal, they were also limiting or basically stopping trade to Israel, which was obviously Israel's not happy about that. And there were statements made by Egypt's president and foreign minister and so on, leading up to that war in 55 and 54, of the obliteration of Israel and the Jewish state and so on and so forth. Right. So it doesn't seem like they were just, pawns in the hands of the English and French, but rather they were, in essence, trying to stop themselves from being obliterated before it happened.
They had that, yeah. I mean, it was certainly, Nasser was very vocal that he was going to champion an anti-colonial movement and was going to get rid of the state of Israel. That's absolutely the case. And he stacked a bunch of troops up, in the Sinai in the 60s, and that's how they got wiped out there. But at the same time, I mean, it was about control of the Suez Canal. And in terms of stopping trade, in 67, I thought you were going to say 67, because in 67, the Israelis say, well, the surprise attack was not a surprise attack. It was in response to Nasser closing the Straits of Tiran and the Gulf of Aqaba, or Eilat. And we could get into well, where does that stand legally and such like that. But I got to say, Eilat is not an important trade port, so he was not in control of trade. And the Haifa, the Tel Aviv, Jaffa, those are the important ports, and it had no bearing on economic trade. But you're right, Nasser, there was a clear animosity, and it was vocal, and that phrase, pushing the Jews into the sea, you referred to the foreign minister, there was real animosity there, from Egypt, from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, up until...
He wasn't the first one to...
up until the peace treaty.
My other question was, you mentioned in the second picture there, since it's up, the idea of the partition. You had mentioned that it was, in a certain sense, a fantastic deal for the Jews living there because they have sort of the prime real estate up the coast, whereas the Arab population gets sort of the eastern side, which wasn't as cool, and that they had a huge population in that area as well. The Arabs had a huge population in that area, on the western coast, but wasn't about 50% of the population in that area of the Arab population in the state? Wasn't it within the area of the partitioned area given to the Arabs, whereas only about a quarter of their population was in or maybe that. Hold on.
It was
half.
closer to 50-50. It was closer to 50-50. I mean, your original saying wasn't 50% of it in that future Arab state. And I don't remember exactly what the percentage was, but a large population, there would have been something like
almost 400,000, I think.
There was a total. You're saying there was almost 400,000 Jews. There was about 300 and something thousand Jews and about 650,000 Arabs, right? And
in that region, in the Western region,
in the Mandate of Palestine at that point, after the Second World War, right? And now a great number of people. Now there were a lot of Jews waiting to get to Palestine out in Cyprus and DPs in Europe, and as soon as they had a state, those people came, right? So the population grew very quickly, but the population is about a third to 2/3 Jewish to Arab, right? And the partition was a 50-50, right? And a lot of the Arab population was in the future Jewish states, especially important cities like Haifa and Jaffa, right? What was the percentage? I don't remember, but it was a figure over 100,000, right? I mean, I don't remember the population number, but I remember it was, a number of 6 digits. I can check it. You can Google it.
Just want to say one thing. 2 more questions, and we got to wrap it up. And then I got to feed you once again.
We'll eat, but if you have more questions,
and whoever really wants to ask the questions, then after you're done eating, because we have the room till 9:45, then they could ask you questions.
Okay.
Sounds great.
Okay. You touched on this a little bit before about the major demographic shift in Israel in regards to the Israeli Palestinians. And from my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I guess their population is growing a lot faster than the Israeli population. So what does that mean for the solutions? Does that change that? And how does the government work? Would they be a viable or growing clout politically?
Well, I mean, it is seen in Israel, as somebody asked about the Jewish character of the state, it is seen in Israel as a threat, right? The end of the Soviet Union and 1 million Jews coming from Russia, that sort of set the balance for Israelis, because there's natural population growth for Palestinians that they couldn't compete with. And in Israel, that's seen as a threat. And that's one of the reasons some sort of what we would call moderate parties, I mean, it's kind of weird, it's such a hostile, crazy place to call anybody moderate in a way, but the moderate parties say, we've got to have this two-state solution. Otherwise, there's going to be a demographic time bomb, they say. That's what they call it, a demographic time bomb. So, yeah, it is. And that's why some people want to create a second state so that Palestinians are there, and they don't, from the Israeli point of view, threaten to run in elections or vote in elections in Israel.
Okay. All right. This program is officially done. Please give him a round of applause.
Thank you all.
He'll be back. He's just going to get a plate of food.
Okay.
So there's going to be more questions as soon as he's nourished. Okay.
Fall over.